everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about art critiques. How do you give a good critique? And what do you do if you receive a really bad one that hurts you? What do you do? It can be really difficult. On both sides, it can be very emotionally taxing. And I think there's a lot of weird standards that pop up around critique. I know in a lot of art communities that I've been in, it can get really nasty. It can get very personal. It can be very hurtful. I think a lot of people go into critiques thinking that you have to tear the piece apart, and if someone can't take harsh criticism, then they're a baby and they shouldn't be doing art. And I totally disagree with that, especially when you go into a critique giving really harsh feedback to someone who's not prepared for it at all, who's maybe not at that level. Or maybe you don't know what you're talking about and you're just being mean without anything to back it up. But I think there's a lot of stigma against people who have trouble receiving critique. And I think there's this expectation that you're supposed to tear everything apart. And I just don't think that's a very helpful approach to critique, because the point of a critique should be to help people. You know, the point is to improve the artwork and help the artists around you improve their skill and help improve your own skill. Because looking at art and talking about what you think works and what doesn't is a really great way to understand art for yourself, not only to help the person that you're critiquing. So here's my advice from what I've enjoyed receiving and what I've found has been helpful for others. I mean, Bones and I, we do a critique stream once a month here on our channel for patrons. So if you are someone who would be interested in receiving critiques from me or Bones, go sign up for our Patreon. There should be a link down below. Anyways, I'm going to get into the meat of this video. Woo. Okay, so let's start with when you're giving a critique. So my number one rule is always be kind. Because you can pick apart a piece of art and tell people about what you think they need to improve on. But you can still do it in a very kind, respectful way. For me, like, a critique is not a place to assert your authority as an artist or make someone feel bad about themselves for, say, not knowing something, or because they're, maybe they're at the beginning of their art journey and they haven't learned a certain thing yet. It's not your place to make them feel bad for not knowing that stuff or to show off. I've gotten critiques like that and it really sucks. It's really frustrating. It makes me not want to listen to the person giving the critique because they're a jerk. I'm not going to listen to a jerk because they're probably just trying to sabotage me. That's where my mind goes when someone's being really hurtful and nasty. So it's not the approach that you want if you want someone to actually pay attention to you and listen to what you have to say. And a really mean approach is terrible for new artists or beginners, because when you're starting out in a field, whatever it is, or like a new hobby or a new skill you're trying to learn, it's better to get praise. I was reading like an article about this. There's actually like psychology behind it, I believe. When you're beginning, what you're looking for is praise, to be encouraged to keep going. Especially because like when someone's starting out, there's only so much critique you can give them before you overwhelm them. And it's better to just give praise and encourage like places where they're doing really well and point out some places where they can improve. But really focus on being positive and encouraging them to keep going, because if you tell someone that they're doing terribly, they're not going to continue and they're not going to learn anything because they're just going to be flooded with self-doubt. Whereas if you are talking to an artist who's maybe more experienced, they tend to look for more nitpicks and like quote-unquote negative feedback. For example, when I'm looking for a critique on something, I'm very confident in my art skill. I know a lot of the fundamentals. I mean, I'm still learning and I have weaknesses in my art, but I'm at a place where I'm really comfortable with that, and I'm okay if someone says like, hey, this part isn't working or this looks really weird. And I want to hear that because I know what pieces look nice and I want to know where my flaws are. But when I was starting out, anytime I heard that, it made me cry. So so it always kind of take into account the skill level of the person you're talking to. If they're new into it, definitely heap on the praise and encourage them to keep going. If they're maybe more experienced and they're open to kind of like nitpicky feedback, then give it. And always ask. Just kind of ask how nitpicky you can go. But even then, the point, as always, is to help someone improve their art, not to make them feel bad. That's the rule number 1. Second rule, I would say, is make sure you're descriptive, not prescriptive. I'd recommend only giving advice if it's asked for. Now, the reason for this is that someone may look at your work, they might understand when something's wrong with it. Like, it might be they feel something's off about maybe the proportion or the perspective or the colors feel weird. They might understand that something feels off, and they might understand when something looks good or feels right. However, this person might not understand where you want to go with your comic or your story or this piece, and it's not their place to tell you what to do, because their own bias is going to come in. They might not understand your intent, and you're the authority of what you're going to do with your art. So, when you're giving advice, make sure that you are describing how you're feeling about it and why you think that is, but don't necessarily always give advice about what to do about it. Some people might find it stifling. The only time I would say that it's okay is if you're an art teacher or you have lots of skill and experience, or if the person is being very receptive and says, like, do you have any advice on what I could do? Give me some ideas, and maybe you can hash things out. But usually go for descriptive first. If you ever say, like, this part looks bad, make sure you're always saying why it looks bad. Unpack everything you say. For example, if I said, like, oh, these colors are bad, someone might be like, they could think that they're bad at choosing colors, and that might not be true. It could be that this particular shade of blue is clashing with this particular shade of green, even though blue and green are, like, a good color combo. Like, it's really important to be as descriptive as possible and only give advice if they're looking for it. Along those same lines, your critique doesn't have to be objective, but it should have evidence. So, like I said, if you're saying these colors are good together, you have to explain why they're good. And a lot of art is very subjective, like, no 2 color combinations are better than any other 2 color combinations. However, if you're looking for a particular mood, colors might work better than another set of colors. So I always explain, like, oh, I really liked your use of these reds because it feels very passionate and fiery, and this piece is about, like, a warrior, so it works. Give evidence, give reasons why things are good or bad. And it does help to understand the art fundamentals because it gives you kind of language to describe what you like or don't like about it, or why you think it might be working or not working. But if you don't know that stuff, it's okay to just say kind of why you like it. Explain your feelings about it. It makes me feel happy because the character looks happy. And that's fine. You give an explanation. So there you go. That's kind of how you give a critique. Be as descriptive as possible. Focus on helping the person, not beating them down. Be open to a discussion. Answer questions if they have them. Don't be rude, okay? That's my number 1 rule for a reason. And I don't think there's, like, a select criteria you have to talk about every time you critique something. I think that can be kind of stifling, because every piece and every comic has, like, different parts that maybe need work and different parts that the person excels at. So I don't have anything structured like that. But it's very important to be as descriptive as possible, because that's the most helpful you can be, and to help each other. Okay, moving on. Ursula. Stop repeating yourself. Okay, so what do you do if you're getting a critique? How do you deal with it? Especially if you're getting a really harsh one. First off, try your best to not take it personally. And I realize that does sound very much like, oh, if you can't handle a harsh critique, then maybe you shouldn't do art, because I don't believe that at all. But I think a lot of people really entwine their art with their sense of self or their self-worth, and you really need to kind of step away from that when you're getting a critique. Because the point of the critique, if everyone's going into it with the right headspace, is it's not about you. It's not about who you are as a person. If you have a mistake in your art, that doesn't mean you're bad at art at all. Everyone is always learning stuff. Even, like, the masters are learning new things all the time. And it's really important to understand that the whole point of this is just to improve the piece of art. If someone can point out a mistake to you, it means that you can work on it and you're not missing it and it's not staying in your work. So make sure that if you're starting to feel really hurt by it. It might be, on one hand, it might be time to say, like, I'm not ready for this, I need to step away. Or it could mean you maybe need to not be so hard on yourself for your art. Because your art is good, and you're learning, and that's all that matters. And if you had fun making it, that's really important. And use these critiques to, like, learn things and improve and get excited about excelling and getting better. But yeah, like I said, it's okay to make mistakes, and you can always fix them, because you're a really cool artist, and all you gotta do is try. Don't be discouraged from moving forward with your art and improving on it. And my second piece of advice is that you don't have to accept every bit of advice that you get. If you get a piece of advice that you don't agree with, or something that was delivered in a really hurtful way, you don't have to take it. Like, if someone is telling you that, like, they don't like your story because there's cats in it, obviously this person is not the person who should be reading your comic, and you don't have to listen to them, because your intent for this comic was to have cats in it. You know better for something like that. This mostly comes when people are kind of telling you what you need to do and giving kind of unsolicited advice, where they say, like, oh, you should be fixing your anatomy because your anatomy isn't realistic. And you're like, well, it's a simplified thing, and I did this, like I had a lot of intention behind making this character look this way, and they're not supposed to be, like, perfectly proportioned. Then obviously don't listen to them, because they're trying to tell you to do something that's against your initial intent. Bones and I had this happen with our first comic. We once got, like, a very scathing review where the person made lots of predictions about where the story was going and about the characters after only reading a chapter. And the way they wanted our story to go just was not how it was going to happen, and it didn't appeal to us. And it was safe to say we didn't take a lot of their advice. Like, there were some things we took away, like some of little pointers about mistakes I had in the art, but the other stuff, it was like, why? I don't need to listen to this. This is silly. This will just waste our time if we change everything about our story because this one person didn't like it. So always kind of think about what people are saying. Sometimes they might phrase something in a way that sounds like they're trying to help you, or like they've been told that art has to be this way. I'll stick with the anatomy example. Like, they think that all anatomy has to be, like, perfectly proportioned to, like, the average human, and that's not what you want. You don't have to listen to them. You know, someone told them the wrong advice somewhere along the way, and you don't have to listen to it if you don't agree with it. But yeah, don't listen to any pressures you might get that you have to listen to every single thing, every little piece of feedback you get, because you really don't have to. You can pick and choose what you want and what works for you, because you know what you want to do with your art. That's the most important part. But finally, if you are in a situation where you keep getting the same feedback from multiple sources, it might be time to start listening to that. So for example, I used to get lots of feedback saying, like, oh, your art is really messy. Like, it's full of movement, but, like, it's hard to tell what's going on because it's so messy. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I don't care. Like, it's supposed to be messy, and, like, I like it this way, and I'm not going to listen to this one person who said it. But then I started getting it from Bones, who's someone I really trust, and who was also leading the projects we were working on. And I started getting it from other people when I'd get critiques. And I was like, you know what? I think maybe my art is messy, and I'm just avoiding working on it because it's hard. And then once I started working on it, I really liked the direction it was going when my stuff got a little bit more solid and less messy. So yeah, if you are getting the same feedback over and over again, it's time to consider it, at least. It could be true. Whereas if you get one kind of weird comment that you totally don't agree with, you don't have to listen to it, because it's just one random person who didn't get it, and that's fine. But yeah, if everyone's looking at your art, they say there's something off about it, start paying attention to that, because that's when you know that there's a through line of something you need to work on and improve. So there you go. I hope that helps. Let's get mean critiques out of this, because they're rude and they don't help anyone. And I will die on this rock. Again, I really hope that helps. If you're early on in your art stuff and all of the critique stuff sounds very overwhelming, it definitely helps to start looking into the art fundamentals, because you can get some more kind of objective evidence on what works and what doesn't, just based on what previous artists have figured out for you. Yeah, just focus on what you want your intent to be. What did you have planned for this? Is it working? Isn't it working? It really helps to kind of have an understanding of where you wanted things to go, to understand how to fix things to get them to that point if something is off. And yeah, good luck. It's hard. There's a lot of people who will give you advice who don't know what they're talking about. There are a lot of people who will give you advice that you're not ready for, and it'll take a while for it to come around to you. I've had many lessons like that. Things my art teacher told me that I was like, oh, this is silly. And now I'm like, oh my God, she was right. So yeah, it's a journey, improving your art and receiving critiques and giving critiques. And I believe in you. And I wish you luck. So thanks again for watching. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for following us on this crazy 100 days challenge again. Make sure to check out our Patreon if you are interested in getting a critique from me and Bones. And I guess subscribe if you want more videos about art and comics and stuff. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.